Cool. So carbon is special. And remember that if you go to the periodic table, silicon is also special, but we have a lot more carbon on our planet, which is why we are carbon-based life forms. What makes it so special is the fact that in its outermost energy level, there are 4 valence electrons, which means there's 4 places for something new to grab onto it, which is a pretty huge thing, considering that most of the molecules that make up us, and pretty much any life on our planet, relies on the ability for this to happen. So, without going too crazy into detail, just a little bit step forward, when we have all these carbons, and we used chlorine as an example, not that carbon and chlorine is necessarily a beneficial compound, but just to highlight that, hey, look, all these things can grab on here. When we look at carbon, kind of same point of view, but just to see how it happens, carbon, it turns out, we know that it can connect to a bunch of different stuff with these valence electrons. More so, though, that can connect in a few different ways. So we'll just look real quickly at types of carbon, and I'm going to use C, connections. Now, in reality, as we're dealing with these, most things aren't just carbon. Like, carbon is a key part of this, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens with carbon. But just so we can see kind of how this works, a few different ways. Carbon can connect itself first in chains. So carbon chains are common. Now, in modern computing and materials work, you're gonna, like, maybe you've come across it. TikTok is back, so I guess if you follow TikTok science stuff, bless you. Carbon nanotubes, they can make little tubes that are like beyond microscopic. You can't see them with regular microscopes. It's just atoms that form these tubes that will eventually be used to send electricity and things like that. But as a simple picture, we're not talking about like chain link chains. I'm not going to draw C's everywhere. I'm just going to use those circles. Check it out. There's a carbon that connects to another carbon, that connects to another carbon, that connects to another carbon. We can make chains like this, and they can be crazy long. Yes, sir. I would encourage you to, if you want it. Like, it's nice to see it, and I'm not going to draw them super detailed. Okay. Chains work nice. They connect straight to straight, end to end, like they can be really long. Okay, beyond this, we can also get rings. Not to confuse with the energy levels, but a ring of carbon, and this can be however many pieces, but I'm just going to draw it like this. Check it out. Look at all these carbons stuck together in this nice little ring fashion. It can be 5, 6, however many. The rings can be huge, the rings can be tiny. Okay, carbon can stick together in rings. Now, we don't see it because the 3-dimensional part is kind of hard, but just check this out. Don't draw anything more. But each of these has 2 connections already, right? Like every single carbon here has 2 pieces where it joins to another one. How many valence electrons did carbon have though? 4. Which means I don't draw them, but are there places for other stuff to connect to each of these carbons? So this ring could then build out to be a larger structure if other stuff stuck to it. Okay, so I'm cool with that. The last one, and I'm going to draw it over here just so we can save a little bit of space, is what we would refer to as branches. In this one, you do not have to be specific, just so you know, like I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. When we talk about carbon branches or trees, if you will, I'm not even thinking as I do this. But check it out, we have branches happening where these things join in, and maybe they come up and join in wonky ways. They can go however they want, but it's not a ring, it's not a straight chain, it's just a branch. Cool. Now, I know that our focus in here is not on the chemistry side of stuff, but we have to at least be comfortable with talking about the very basic chemistry stuff as we're building these ideas up. Going through this, each of these fill a very specific role within the human body. Whether it's a chain or a ring or a branch, there are different molecules and biological functions that rely on carbon's ability to do this. I just want to stress, silicon could do the exact same thing on a planet where it was more abundant. Sweet. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is help me, and I just want to go with your gut feelings, but you guys are going to do a small little group thing. It's going to take like 5-ish minutes, I think. Maybe not, we'll see. But I want us to start thinking about elements in the human body. So we're going to make a little table, elements in humans. Now, I don't have the percentages handy off the top of my head, but what we're going to do is there's 2, 4, 6 elements that are the most abundant in life. So what we're going to do is make a small table. We will say, here's the element that we're talking about. And I'm going to ask you guys to help just by gut feeling. I want to know the element itself, the atomic number, which we'll review here in just a moment, and the valence electrons and the number of them. Valence, my C's and E's look identical a lot of the time. Electrons. Okay. If I have to extend this table further, I will. Now, I don't really think that it'll take 5 minutes, but just so you guys are aware, we are going to be using the periodic table in the back of your book to kind of put these together, and none of them are specified here, which is cool. I want just shout them out as you're looking at that table. What do you think are the most common elements in me, in you, in life, in general? Elements from that table that you've probably reasonably... hydrogen? I agree with you. Hydrogen itself is the element. And notice, RJ, I stopped you because you'll probably be able to give me another one. I don't care if you write down hydrogen or you give me the chemical symbol, which is what for hydrogen? H.
Does sulfur count?
Sulfur is super important to humans. Now, we don't eat sulfur or anything, but it does play a very important role. Any others that you guys can think of that just gut feeling would be important? Carbon, that's a big one. Carbon. So we do need potassium, but it's not one of the top 6. And I'm just looking at top 6 by makeup of people, just so you know. Potassium is most certainly important. Okay, so we got hydrogen, sulfur, and carbon. Anything else?
Oxygen.
Ooh, we need oxygen. What was that comment, RJ?
Protein.
So proteins we'll look at today, and it turns out that proteins aren't an element by themselves, but everything that we put up here is going to form proteins. So oxygen is also, whoever said that, thank you. Okay, we need 2 more that are super important. These ones might be tricky. And we're shot in the dark at this point, and I'm fine with that. As you breathe in, there's oxygen in the air, right?
Carbon dioxide?
So the second you say anything other than one word, you're looking at a compound. So whether it's a molecule or an ionically bonded compound.
Oh, calcium.
Calcium is also important, but it's not one of the big ones. I don't know that you guys would guess these. The air we breathe is about 20% oxygen. Do you know what the vast majority of the elements in the air that we're breathing right now are?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen is super important in our body and in plants and all that, so life in general. And there's one more. I don't think you guys would have gotten this one. It's phosphorus. I mean, maybe. I kind of feel like it's a guess once we're here. Is phosphorus just pee?
Yeah.
Did you check before you said yes?
Yeah, it is pee.
Okay. All right. What I want you guys to do, talk with one another. You're a group of 5, which means 5 times the collective brain power. I want you guys to, for each of these, give me the atomic number and the number of valence electrons based on some of the nice stuff that we've seen. Real quickly, just to make sure we're all on the same page. What's an atomic number?
The number next to the symbol of the element.
So it's the number in the top left of your periodic table, right? And what does it represent? It's like the fact that hydrogen is atomic number 1, what does that mean? Not quite. Thank you for volunteering though. That felt like I was being a little bit negative to you. I was not intending to. So the question at hand before we finish this table is, what does the atomic number represent?
The atoms in it?
Not atoms, because each of these is a single atom. Ooh, louder. The number of protons that is in your element. Cool. So using your table and prior knowledge, maybe in your text, I want you guys to complete this. Cool. I'll give you a moment, talk it out. Back into this. These are the most abundant elements that you will find in life. Atomic number 1 is hydrogen, and it has 1 valence electron. So I'm going to switch to yellow only because of the stuff that you guys have found. How How did you know it had one?
Because just it's a single one. Like
It's in which group?
one.
Oh, that'll do it. Cool. Awesome. Sulfur, what's your atomic number?
16.
16, which means
6.
it has 6 valence electrons. The number in the top left on sulfur, Fred, is it 16?
Yeah.
Yep, and which group is it in? Coincidentally, so here's that ones digit with the 6. Atomic number, I'm just asking number of protons, right? Carbon
6.
is number 6, that's its atomic number, and this is what makes it so special. 4 valence electrons. Oxygen, I think, is 8,
Yeah.
and it has 6 valence electrons.
Yes.
How about nitrogen, 17?
7.
7? 17? And this is off of memory, so I'm kind of...
Wait, 17.
Is it not?
7.
Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen is 7. And valence electrons?
5.
5 of them. And last but not least is this lovely phosphorus.
Phosphorus. 5. 15.
Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron. 15 is the atomic number. And the valence electrons then is also... Whoa, that's not 5.
Wait. Yeah.
I don't remember phosphorus off the top of my head. It's number 15. Oh, it is 5 as well, huh? All right, cool. So, based on this, we already know roughly which one. Do you guys want to see like the by percentages? Which ones are most common? Are you interested?
Oh, okay. Hold on. I got that. Huh?
You guys interested to see what percentage of the atoms inside of you are each of these? Okay, we'll do a quick Google search. Moving forward with this, be able to identify the number of valence electrons. That's an important idea. Guarantee when we get to the point of taking a test later in this week, I think. I'm going to ask about why carbon's so special. Why is carbon so special?
Because it makes us human. It makes it feathers on the planet.
So it's not just humans, though.
Everything in our world.
So why? Why is that the case? Why is carbon so common? Or why would silicon be so common on another alien planet?
Because silicon would like make the aliens. That's how their body's built, and we're like a carbon-based form.
So you're right. Why are we carbon-based? What's so special about carbon that makes it form all of us? Something really specific.
It's a chemical reaction.
Not so much the reactions.
Chemical regarding carbon. Honestly, so C is up here now.
Why is this so important again?
Oh, because it connects.
4 handles. 4 handles. That's why the 4 valence electrons is what makes carbon so crazy important to us. Okay. It can make all of these different structures. That is not us. So let me delete a little bit of algebra here.
I go grab some water real quick, Priscilla.
Yeah. Get a drink for me too, okay? All right. So, moving forward, we're going to try something rather than just me talking at you. You guys, it's not going to be a big presentation. Fingers. It's not going to be a big presentation. But I am going to have you guys read some stuff independently, and then I'm going to pull information out of you. Cool. So, as we move forward, it turns out that, and I don't know why that's a tilde. I'm going to make this a bullet. There are 4 main categories that all of these elements wind up making. So, 4 main categories of biological building blocks. And we're going to sneak in a vocab here. Biological building blocks. Why am I still thirsty? Okay. Now, 4 of them that we're going to deal with. And specifically, I probably could have made this a asterisk, and I'm actually going to sneak it in as an asterisk now. But our focus today, the main topic, rather than just looking at the chemistry of carbon and how it's like made, we're going to be looking at what we're going to define and talk about as our macromolecules. Now, don't confuse this with like the macros that you're talking about if you're lifting and stuff. Those are macronutrients. These are molecules, and we'll build up to the nutrients eventually, but macromolecules. Now, if something is really, really small, so much so that I need to look at it through a specialized device, is there a word for it? What's that specialized device that has a bunch of mirrors and it magnifies stuff really well?
Microscope.
A what scope?
Microscope.
Micro. Micro meaning what? small. Now, you guys have guaranteed, some of you at least, if you're in weights, you guys have seen the word macro. If micro means small, what do you think macro means? They're bigger. Now, in the terms of organic chemistry that we're looking at, obviously they're not huge, right? But if you consider an atom as tiny, it's just one little tiny thing. If you stick a bunch of atoms together, does it get bigger in space? Like literally larger. That's where this macro comes from. So when we're talking about macromolecules, all that we're really defining is large molecules. And I'm going to put that in quotations because large is relative here. Compared to atoms, they are. These are large molecules made of smaller organic molecules. Now, we've talked about it briefly, but I'm not going to write it, but we need to make sure we drive it home. This organic, when we see it, it is not the same organic that you're going to find at the grocery store. Anytime we refer to organic in the scientific sense, outside of agriculture with organic foods, we're just saying carbon. There is carbon in all of these. Okay, now, one step a little further. If I have, hypothetically, let's say I have some molecule that makes, and we're just going to use a particular protein that we looked at last week, okay? So let's say I have protease. It's an enzyme, it's a protein. Okay. The stuff that protease is made of, do you think it's just one singular compound? Like, is it just one little molecule right here? Or do you think we have to put a bunch of them together to make it have this bigger function?
Bigger function.
Like, one molecule is tiny, right? Like, there's trillions of cells in our bodies. They must be bigger to deal with a larger quantity, which means they're made of a bunch of little things that are just stuck together somehow. When we look at these macromolecules, what we're going to see is in our purposes, or for our purposes, and this, notice the arrow difference is just kind of a follow-up definition. We are going to discuss, it sounds fancy, it's not really crazy, the idea of a polymer. Okay, a polymer is just repeated connections, repeated covalent, and I'm going to say repeated covalently bonded molecules. Repeated covalent, which means what again? Shared or given? Shared. Repeated covalently bonded molecules. Now, when I think of a polymer, it makes me think of like almost like slime in my head. It's just my visualization. Slime is made of a bunch of little pieces, right? So if I were to have I wish I'd brought slime up here with me, but if I had slime, I just grab it and I could stretch it out and it'd be like stuck together, right? Like stringy almost. That is a polymer and what I'm thinking of with polymers. So, going forward, there are 4 of these that we care about, and we're going to pause the video because you guys are going to do some short readings and summarizing, and I'm going to pull information out of you as we go through it. Okay, we're going to try the first one just as a whole class. You guys are going to read a couple paragraphs, and I'm going to see from that reading, what do you draw out as important? And then I'll help us with the notes here, but mostly I'm hoping for whatever you tell me is what I'll write up here. So, of this, and these are backwards, so that's my bad. I just missed a little part of my notes. You do not have to change it, but it's going to bug me if I don't. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to move it underneath. There are 4 main categories that we're going to deal with. In your books, and I want you guys to like move so you're near each other so you can talk, which you're all pretty near each other already. You are going to, in your text, read about carbohydrates. These are the first of these macromolecules that we're going to concern ourselves with. Carbohydrates. And I'm going to make it a definition, but I want you guys, and I'll give you the page here in a second, you're going to read this and see what you pick out as the main information. So carbohydrates, and right off the bat, before you do the reading, and it's only a couple paragraphs, what do you think a carb is? What's a carbohydrate?
Isn't it used as like food-wise?
So foods have carbs. Can you give me a food that has carbs?
Rice or...
Ooh, rice. Bread. Banana will have some carbs. Does my soda have carbs?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing
Pasta. Most things have carbs in them.
except water.
Except water. Okay, so on page 153 of your text, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. You do not have to, like, jot down the notes. We'll summarize it together. But if in your margin, which is just the side of your page, if you need to write something or underline it in your book, whatever, don't do it in pen so that we can clean it. But I want you guys to read about carbohydrates, and I'm going to draw from you guys what we're going to say about them here about 5 minutes. Okay, read, summarize, pick out important information. Carbohydrates, page 153. Cool. I'll give you a minute. Talk it out. I would pick somebody to read it out loud if I were you guys. I'm not going to pick that person. But how would we define a carbohydrate then? Like, just based on what we read. Something about a ratio.
Ratio, hydrogen, oxygen.
Okay, so there's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, right? So as a simplified way, I'm trying to, made of, and are you guys getting comfortable enough with your notes that when you see C, you know it's carbon?
Yeah.
Okay, carbon what and what?
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen
Oxygen.
and oxygen. And then this is going to feel like mathy language to me, but there's no real math, such that there's a specific ratio that this shows up in. For every carbon, what does there exist? Be more specific. Like, you have to read. For every carbon, they show up in a specific ratio. There's one oxygen. Cool. So I'm going to say for every carbon, there are 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Now, what this means is that if we wanted to, and I don't intend to do this, but it's totally valid. If I wanted to pull just some random compound or polymer, if you will, and throw it up on the board, if you can see that for every carbon there's 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, you know you're looking at a carbohydrate of some sort. Now, this is how we define it. Now, in general, they talk about this kind of way to simplify it and subscript, and I'll wait till you guys catch up. 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. That's like having a water with a carbon. But it might not just be water because they're not just hydrogen and oxygen bonded together. Okay. I'm going to wait till I see people done writing because this is an important way to identify these. 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen for every carbon. Now, you don't have to jot this down because I didn't dig into a specific one, but hypothetically, I'm going to pretend like there's a carbohydrate that starts with C3. 3 carbons. Can we make up our own, again, this might not be real, just so you know, but can we make up something that you could convince me would be a carbohydrate?
Yeah.
How many hydrogens would this thing have to have?
6.
6. How'd you get that? You're right.
Oh, I just did. I was like, man, I'll double it. I was like, I got.
Give it to the next person.
Yeah.
There's 3 carbons, and for every carbon there needs to be how many hydrogen? 2. Okay, so how many oxygen should there be? For every carbon there's how many oxygen?
Plus 1 oxygen, so 3.
3. Okay, this would be a carbohydrate because I can see that ratio is there. Now, in chemistry, while we're looking at it, and we'll use the glucose example that they do because that's a pretty common carbohydrate, anything with sugar, anywhere has glucose in it. So this is a follow-up, but I just don't have the space in my notes. In here, we use the glucose. We use glucose, which remember is just sugar. And it has the formula lost my spot, CH2O. And this is glucose. And we use this subscript N because just like we spoke about a minute ago, if I have glucose, for example, it's typically not going to be just one singular tiny, tiny piece of glucose. There's a bunch of them. Like if you eat sugar, there's obviously more than one glucose atom in there or molecule. Okay, in this situation, this is really common in chemistry. If I don't want to have to write C55 billion or million or 1,000 or whatever the number might be, instead of saying I have this many carbons, this many hydrogens, this many oxygens, it's easier just to say I have this many glucose. Right? Instead of saying I have 50 carbon and 100 hydrogen and 50 oxygen, it'd be much easier just to say I have 50 glucose. Okay, This N right here is called a subscript, like a submarine. Okay, we use this where N is the number of glucose molecules. In a chain. And I'm just going to say in joined together, rather. Joined together. Okay, we do this to avoid having to write all the big subscripts. 50 glucose or 100 glucose or 1,000 glucose molecules or polymers is so much easier to talk about than all those individual pieces. Okay, beyond this, we have lots of different carbohydrates. And we just saw it can be mono, it can be di, or it can be poly. As we're looking at these, we're just going to make our simplest ones. Simple sugars, which easy for our body to process. They're easy to be made or joined. Simple sugars, which are the least complex of these three pictures, which, I'll go back over here. Which one's the least complex?
The first one.
The one on the left. Why?
Because it's just one.
It's just one. And what's that root word for one?
Mono.
Mono. If you have it so simple that there's only one little piece there, we call these monosaccharides. Mono. And there's two C's in this word. Mono, meaning one. I honestly don't know saccharide off the top of my head. We can dig into it if you guys are interested. Okay, like I have no idea. I have a feeling it's going to mean carbohydrate. That's my guess. One sugar is what it literally means. As we look at these, if we have a simple sugar or a monosaccharide, it means that we have just a simplified glucose, where we have either three. Whoa, I did that backward. Do you guys know compound inequalities before I write it? Can you tell me if I write three numbers, and you don't, this is just me talking, are these the same size? Which one's bigger out of these two? So out of these two, sorry. Okay, still just these two, Fred. 5's bigger, so it equals to 5, right? Do you agree that 3 is less than or equal to 5?
No, it's less.
Well, you're right. It is less than specifically, but at least less than or equal to it. Okay, is 5 less than or equal to 7? Is 5 bigger than 7? So it better be less than or equal to it, right? Okay, this is a compound inequality. For this situation, simple sugars always, always, always will have either 3 as this N number. It's a chain of 3 glucose, or as big as 7. So if you have 3 to 7 glucose stuck together, you get a monosaccharide, a simple sugar. Okay, anything bigger than that, we might get into fancier types of things. Okay, now as a follow-up and looking at this, have I lost anybody yet? Can you tell me where I lost you? Okay, is it the vocab part? Like when did you, I'm going to kick over here real quick. Were you cool with this table when we made it? Okay, when should you bring up questions if you're not getting something we're doing? Just to verify. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. When should you have told me you didn't quite get what we were doing there? For sure. Let me know like immediately. Okay, for this, it's going to play a role. This is just to demonstrate that this is the only one that's special, and they're all special in reality, but this is the one that we build everything off of because it has those 4 handles. Okay, looking at these, if you stick a bunch of stuff together, it's called a molecule, and if you have carbon, it's organic. Okay, done. And there's 4 of these. Now, just so you know, we're going to deal with these big macros. Carbs are an important thing. Like they're macronutrients that we deal with. They're forms of macromolecules. Tell me something else you might track if you're trying to get fit. Carbs, for sure. Proteins are a big one. Calories, you're getting in a bigger, broader picture. But I agree with you. Would you eat a bunch of bacon if you were trying to get real fit?
Yeah.
Ooh, I like how, so it depends on who you are, really. I could make the claim that I would eat a bunch of bacon if I was trying to lose weight and get, like, jacked. Why?
Because you're losing weight,
Fats. Carbs are big ones, right? Proteins are big ones. Fats are big ones. Those are 3 of these macro things that we're looking at. And all we're doing now is saying, look, carbs are made of these things, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And coincidentally, because carbon is so prevalent in everything, what do you think at least might be in proteins? Is there carbon in protein, you think? What's the most important element for life on our planet? So let me ask again then. If carbon's the most important on our planet, Fred, do you think carbon might be in proteins also? You think it might be in fats?
Yes.
You think it might be in nucleic acids, which we'll talk about later? Yes. Carbon's fundamental. It's in so much stuff, like almost every part of us. Everything, down to the very smallest structures. Okay, beyond that, RJ, as we're looking here, if you have these joined together in this ratio, it's called a carb. That's just by definition. And to simplify it a little bit out further, this is just sugar. This is the chemical formula for sugar. If these stick together, simple sugars, it's just 3 pieces of sugar stuck together. Now, that's as chill as it gets. As we look at these, monosaccharides are our simple sugars, and we'll use that word. Man, class went really fast today, didn't it? Maybe not for everybody. Simple sugars join to make more complex carbs. Now, when we use these, the simpler, the smaller number of sugars stuck together, the easier for our body to digest. So less work to break it apart, right? If there's only 5 things stuck together, that's way easier than breaking 50 things stuck together. I'm going to make one more comment here before you close that. Okay, when we're looking at these, we see simple sugars combine. A bunch of glucose or other simple sugars can stick together. We get monosaccharides, and I'm not going to write the whole word, mono. We're just going to say that this is like sugar, simple sugar, which glucose is the word for that. If you see sucrose coming from anywhere, that's just sugar that you get from fruit. It's a more complex type of sugar. Okay, so we have monosaccharides, it's just glucose. We get disaccharides, which I'm going to put hyphens after these to show that there's more words coming. These disaccharides, one that's really common is maltose, which is found in your milk. Lactose is another of these. The last one are these polysaccharides. So all that we're doing here is we're looking at carbs that get more complex and bigger structures. So these two, mono and disaccharides, these are really common in humans and in all life. These things provide energy. Sugar gives you energy. These are energy sources. Okay. When we contrast and we get into bigger ones, so more complex, bigger shape, takes up more space. Once we get to these, glycogen is a really common one. And as opposed to our body actually getting energy from these, when we get more complex, it gets too much to break down for our bodies, directly anyway. So instead of just being sources of energy that like power our cells and things like that, all of a sudden once we get to glycogen, we start getting energy storage. So if you have food that you've digested and you've taken a bunch of sugars out of your food, some of it is going to be in this form where it straight up fuels your cells. Some of it is going to get saved for later. It is more complex when it gets saved for later. Energy storage is what we see with polysaccharides. Okay, we'll go more in depth on that tomorrow. Later, Raiders.